None of this is determining if God accepts or does not accept something X person does. Fair enough? So we're not talking about how God judges people. We're only talking about how to recognize if I am, or you personally, are making a mistake and how to avoid it, how to recognize it. So in other words, how to spot it and how to stop it. Spot it, S-P-O-T, and how to stop it, S-T-O-P. Okay, so now we have very important concept. I want you to read this verse. قُلْ هَلْ نُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِالْأَخْسَرِينَ أَعْمَالًا الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صَنْعًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, shall we tell you who are the greatest losers? You've heard of that show, Greatest Losers? This is Allah telling us who are the greatest losers. Who are the greatest losers? Those who go on about their life, doing things while thinking they're doing good, but Allah does not accept their deeds. الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Their activities, their actions, their decisions, their work, their deeds are all gone. Why? They thought they were doing good. They thought they were doing good. Now, I don't know who these people are. I don't claim to be in the seat of Allah, judgment for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor am I telling you you should be. But I'm telling you, would you rather take that risk, or would you rather try to detect when you may be close to that risk and avoid it? It's obviously the second one, right? Yes? So we're trying to avoid it in the rest of this discussion. So all I'm going to go through, the 10 items I'm going to go through today, the 10 items I'm going to go through today are all intended to help us recognize when we're coming close to that. Is that a worthwhile investment in our time? Absolutely, right? I don't want the rest of my life to be wasted. I want it to count, because God knows I've made a lot of mistakes in the past. So I want the future of my life, every minute of it, to count. I spent over 10 years investigating these issues, and I'm going to summarize them as fast as we can. So please, for the next half an hour, please take notes, because I'm not going to take any questions. There are some people that have a hard deadline to leave at 8, and I need to respect that they came at 5 and they need to leave at 8. Those of you who want to continue and stay after 8, I'm going to stay around. So please, if you have questions, write them down so we can talk about them after 8. So we talked about the definition of shirk, we talked about various other things. I'm going to jump forward. The opposite of shirk is taslim. So in other words, if you want to really understand, are you falling into shirk, or are you the opposite of shirk? Ask yourself, are you submitting to what God is saying even when it hurts, even when it pains you to do so? So think of the word Muslim meaning taslim. By the way, when we say Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima, it's not saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa sallim, or sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sallam in the past, Allah did not sallam. Allah did not do this. He's asking you to do this, to do taslim. What is taslim? Read it in the next verse. فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ. Know by your Lord. They do not believe until they seek your guidance. حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ. They look for your decision in whatever they argue about. And then they find no hesitance in themselves in following it, and they surrender completely. وَيُسَلِّمُ تَسْلِيمًا. That's taslim. Okay, so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima, this is the taslim He's talking about, not sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I don't know where we got this one from. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sallam, Allah did not sallam. Make sense? This is the taslim that He's asking us to do. Sallimu taslima. Okay. So the taslim that we're talking about is the opposite of shirk. To submit oneself to the will of Allah, to the guidance from Allah, even when it's against my own interests. It's hard, I know. Al-ikhlas is the other side of it. So sincerity. So So you always question. If you want to know if you're falling into shirk or not, always ask yourself, what is my true motive? What am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm about to do? Why? By yourself. And by the way, if you don't have a practice of writing, after Salat al-Fajr every day, if you take 15 minutes, half an hour to write a few pages, it helps you a lot in cleansing yourself and understanding yourself. And then you can ask these questions. Why did I do this? The Prophet ﷺ has a hadith, حَاسِبُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ قَبْلَ أَن تُحَاسَبُوا. Account for your own deeds before you are accounted for those deeds in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so moving on. We're moving really fast because I want to get through the next part. So now the path of behavioral dysregulation. How did we define behavioral dysregulation? It is shirk. It is basically, at least, maybe possibly unaware. You're committing shirk and you're not aware of it. Okay, so your behavior is not, you're not in full control of your behavior. Does that make sense? So that's borderline shirk. I will grant you that it's not full shirk, because we define full shirk as what? Awareness. You're aware you're disobeying Allah. That's clear shirk. You agree? Okay, so when you're borderline, or when you did not stop to reflect about your motive, when you did not stop to think why you're doing it, or is this acceptable in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's borderline, correct? That's behavioral dysregulation. So you're behaving in a way that is you're not fully in control of yourself. And Allah does not want this. This is borderline being drunk, kind of. That's why drunkenness is not acceptable, because it makes you lose control of your faculties. You understand what I'm saying? I have a feeling most of you are not with me. Okay.
We're not drunk. Halfway. Full coma.
Okay. I'm going to skip a few things. معلش, we need to get into the important things. طيب, because we have less than half an hour. معلش, be patient with me. How many different types of motives? Now, underline the word type. You have papers, right? Write some of these things down, because we're going to go through them. We're only going to go through the highlighted stuff, the stuff in green. The rest of the stuff should be obvious. I'm going to go through them first fast, and then dive into the ones with the green as much as our time allows. So, what am I talking about? What is your motive? Dawafi' in Arabic. What are your motives? What makes you do certain things? What makes you act in certain ways? The first one is biology. That should be very obvious, right? So if I'm created, or if I'm born with a defective brain, can I think correctly? Obviously not. So biology has an impact. If I'm going through a period of time in my life where my stress hormones and my adrenaline and my cortisol and my estrogen and my whatever hormones are out of sync, out of balance, am I excused? Is it normal or acceptable for me to behave in an abnormal way? Of course, because my hormones affect our behaviors, right? Our hormones affect our behaviors. So biology has something to do with it, correct? Yes? And you may do things because your biology is making you do it. We're going to dive more into it. Family. So if you grow up in a family that, as the verse that was discussed a little earlier, right? فَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَى وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حُسْنًا وَإِنْ جَاهَدَ سورة العنكبوت وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حُسْنًا, also Luqman, and in the third surah. ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه وإن جاهداك لتشرك بي ما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما. If they push you and drive you with harshness, or put you through difficulty to make you commit shirk, right? Things of that which you were not aware of at that time, but now you're aware. Don't obey them anymore. فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا, meaning forward, going forward. Don't keep obeying them. Which indicates that your family instills values in you. We're going to skip over this, but I'm just going to give you a couple of quick examples. A father is sitting at home, enjoying NFL football. In the next room, the telephone rings. He's supposed to be on standby to go to work. Yes? The son takes the phone. Before he takes the phone, the father says, "Tell them I'm not here." What value did he just teach that son? Lying. A mother is going through a checkout back during the days in Minnesota. This is a true story. A mother with her 5-year-old, 4-year-old, sitting in the cart, having fun. And the mother is bringing produce onto the conveyor belt in front of the cashier. And in that grocery store, parsley is free. Cilantro is not. So that mother is making a cilantro dish. What's an Indian cilantro dish that you guys like a lot? Give me a name of a dish. Whatever. An Indian type of dish that uses green cilantro. So she has 3 bunches of cilantro. The cashier, who is not familiar with either cilantro or parsley, thinks it is parsley, rings it as parsley, it's free, puts it in the other side of the conveyor belt. The mother stops her, says, "Excuse me, ma'am, this is not cilantro. This is parsley. This is not parsley, it's cilantro. Cilantro is 50 cents a bunch. Parsley is free." The cashier looks at her and says, "It's okay. It's okay." What would you do? You have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old sitting in the cart. What would you do?
It's not.
So there's $1.50 at stake. It's not really a big amount. That's values, okay? You're teaching that child values. In that real story, the mother insisted and said, "No, it's not your money." She's talking to the cashier. "It's not your money to give me. Please ring it correctly." The child sits in the car. He asks his mother, "Mama, why did you do this? She was offering it to you for free." Make sense? Now the value is instilled. That's family value. That's value coming from inside the family. Values become silent guardrails, silent sort of guidance, that quietly direct your decisions as you continue to grow older. So family instills these values, and you become unaware of these values most of the time. Make sense? Okay. So that's the second one. The third one, we're going to talk about it in detail, so I'm going to skip over it. Society and cultural conditioning. Personal history. I grew up in a school. I went to school in high school, and there were a lot of people from certain neighborhood in that school, and they were all mean to me. All 4 of them that I knew from that neighborhood. Out of 30 people in my classroom, these 4 were from that neighborhood. They were all ganging together, and they were nasty to me. And now, 30 years later, every time I drive by that neighborhood, I get the queasies in my stomach. And I veer off and try to choose not to buy anything from that neighborhood, not to talk to anybody from that neighborhood. If I ever get a candidate for employment at the company where I work, and I figure out that he's from that neighborhood, what am I going to do?
Not hire.
Probably not hire him. Consciously or subconsciously, these things may be happening. What is this? These are personal experiences that created personal wounds, and these personal wounds speak to us in silence, even when we're not aware of them. So you behave in unacceptable ways without being aware of it. Make sense? Okay. Next one. This is really fun, and I'm going to talk about it in details. Gut microbiome. Anybody heard of the gut microbiome? Yes. By the way, I would be very happy to share the whole presentation with you. If you'd like to take notes on your questions, not the whole thing, I will make sure that Brother Mahmoud can share the whole presentation with you. I don't have any problem with it. All I ask is if you share it with anybody, you put my name on it so it doesn't get deformed. Okay? So just make sure that you do that. And if you have questions, for sure, you can reach out to me through Brother Mahmoud and he will share with you the information. Gut microbiome, I'm going to talk about it in detail. Acquired parasites. These are parasites that sort of join our body and cause us to behave in really strange and weird ways. And we're going to discuss two of those again in some details. So bear with me. This is really fun. Number 7, cognitive biases. And again, I'm going to discuss it in more details. And then we're going to discuss something called common sense. We do things because they're common sense, and really they're not correct at all. They're not related to the truth. Somehow we figured out, and I'm going to give you a lot of examples. Number 9, misinformation or disinformation. Do you remember what's the difference between misinformation and disinformation? We discussed it during the first hour. So if I come and tell you that Brother Saeed is waiting for you outside and I just saw him stab your tires, not true at all. But I just told you this, and I acted it in a way to make you convinced that this is true. This is disinformation, purposefully trying to create harm. Okay? If I didn't see Saeed, but I saw a person, I don't know who it was. And I came and told you, I think it was Saeed. That's misinformed. Make sense? Okay. So, we are subjected to both of these things. We are subjected to both of these things. When the United States went to war against Iraq, you remember, those of you who were actively following the news, I think we were all 15 years ago, glued to the TVs. I remember the exact time. It was 11 in the morning when the news screens flashed. And what were we told why we were going to war against Iraq? WMD, remember? The mushroom cloud about to be blah, 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 right? And it turned out they knew all along that was a false claim. Later on, Blair, right? The Prime Minister of England publicly accepted that this was all a lie. Oops, we screwed up. Apologize. Of course, 600,000 people who died, that's a different story. The point is, this was a disinformation campaign intended for what? Intended to create consent among the people so they don't object to the government doing the war it did. So that's disinformation. We are subjected to this right now. Right now, we are subjected to it. I guarantee you, if you open the news, at least 60% of the news is that type of activity. At least 60%. It's by fluke that you hear. I'm talking about the regular news, right? If you want to pursue real news, you have to go do your own searches on the internet and the various other sources that are not public, that are not standard information. Okay. I talked a little bit about the Eichmann effect. We're going to get into it again a little bit more. Number 11 and number 12, let me go through them very quickly because I'm not going to be able to dive into them in a lot of details. What's number 11? Number 11 is when, all of the Nabisco and the General Mills and those companies, big international cereal companies, when they get together and they recognize that these products are addictive in terms of, causing the consumers to want more and more. Actually, remember the old commercial that says, I bet you can't just have one? They literally mean it. You can't just have one. It's food that's purposefully addictive. It's created and designed. Okay, so when you are put in those situations where they're purposefully causing you to be addicted to something, not just food. I mean, you can think of at least a dozen different examples. Where the drug dealer may want you to be addicted, so he gives you something for free, right? Or smoking, or even Facebook. Facebook has, under testimony to Congress, admitted that they have followed practices used in gambling casinos, by psychologists who have been advisors to those gambling casinos. They were hired by Facebook to be taught how to create addiction to using things like Facebook and Twitter and all of the social media. Addiction on purpose, without your being aware of it, which leads you to a certain behavior, which leads you to be wasting your life, at least. That's the most benign way of explaining it, or to do things that literally basically cause you to be falling full 100% into shirk. So those are the addictions. Drugs, medicine. I know San Diego is very rich in terms of biomedical type of companies, so I apologize in advance if I'm bursting the bubble of anybody, but the truth is there are drugs that are well known to cause this behavior, meaning behavior changes that are well known to the makers of those drugs. For example, SSRI, you know what SSRI is? Serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like Xanax, right? Or what's another one? Yes, the purple pill, right? You take it and it's supposed to help you with anti-anxiety, to help you relax, right? To help you deal with stress better. Interestingly enough, if you read the side effects of those drugs, one of them, I'm just going to give you one quick example, is something called reduced inhibitions. Weird name. What is reduced inhibition? I'm going to be very sort of plain and almost non-apologetic about this. And I've seen this firsthand. A woman takes this medicine. Not every woman, but if a woman takes this medicine, some women can lose their inhibitions. They become more accepting of moral practices that are just not acceptable without this medicine. That's losing the inhibition. In other words, reducing their ability to say no to the wrong things. This is for women and also for men, but it's proven for women. And I've seen it with my own eyes, people that I know, behaving in weird ways after taking medicine like this. Weird stuff, I know. But you need to think, do we have free will when we are subject to these things? No. Okay, there are other medicine, and I'm not going to talk about all of them right now, but I just wanted to give you a flavor, a taste of all the things that we are really subjected to. So, we have a warning here. So I'm going to dive into more detail. Read the first one first. The mind, once expanded to the dimensions of larger ideas, never returns to its original size. So this is a warning. I'm telling you, basically, what you're about to learn in the next, 15 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, will push the boundaries of your brain, and hopefully you'll be able to deal with this, because it's never going back. This is a warning that says, if I do my job correctly, you're going to walk out of here a lot more aware of reality than you entered. Here's another one from Michael Sandel. Once the familiar turns strange, it's never quite the same. Self-knowledge is like lost innocence. However unsettling you find it, it can never be unthought or unlearned. Okay? So this is a fair warning. Now we dive into the details. Biological. We talked about hormones. Who knows what epigenetic effects are? Anybody heard of that word, epigenetic? Okay, you know what genetic is, right? You know what the word genetic is? We have genes, we have the DNA that causes sort of a blueprint of how our cells get regenerated, correct? Actually, our proteins in our cells and so on. But basically, the DNA is the blueprint that causes us to have different types of organs, different types of functions, different types of muscles, different bones, and so on and so forth. Part of the DNA is behavioral traits, keys, okay, that say if you activate these keys, you're more likely to behave one way or another. And they found that your behavior can either activate these keys or shut down these keys. So for example, your behavior may be to overconsume breads and sugars and pastas and fruits. And if you have the right genes for it, which most of us almost do, you end up with what? Diabetes, right? So you have the genes, you do not do the behavior, the genes do not dictate your future, correct? But if you pile on the behavior, right, then these genes get turned on and you end up with diabetes. The question is what happens to your descendants, your children? By epigenetics, they become more likely to end up with diabetes, or heart attacks, or whatever, right? You get it? So your behavior actually activates certain keys in your DNA, and that burdens your descendants. So biology has an effect on what happens to you, right? Which means has an effect on how you behave. Has not, they found, for example, I'm going to talk about Pottinger's cats. Anybody heard of Pottinger's cats? I'll show you the book, and again, it's included in the presentation. Maybe I recommend that you buy it and read it. It's very interesting analysis that was done right here in California, in Walnut, California, in the 1940-something, if I remember correctly. He brought cats and raised them, this guy, Pottinger, and he raised them in a certain way, and he deprived them of foods, certain foods. So actually he had three groups. I'm not going to go through the whole experiment. One group ate regular, normal, wild cat food. A second one was eating only cooked food, and a third one, a third type of food. And he followed their lives, and the lives of their kittens, their children, and the lives of their grandkids. And he found that the behavior of the grandparents, the type of food of the grandparents, even though their parents did not eat that type of food, transferred to the grandkids. Let me translate it in another way. If your grandparents went through famine, yes, you're more likely to be obese. Even if your parents fed you well, and they were fed well themselves, they were fed healthily. Weird stuff, but it's biology. And biology is undeniable. It has an effect on what happens to you. And what happens to you affects your behavior. And you have to understand that this is part of what you end up doing without knowing why you're doing it. The next one, this point. Anybody heard of memory transplants as a result of organ transplants? Who has heard of this? You heard of it, right? So this is actually told by a lot of different heart surgeons, but the most famous one is right here in Palm Springs, and you can go ask him yourself or read his book or listen to his YouTubes. Dr. Gundry, G-U-N-D-R-Y. You can talk to him or ask about him. He talks about this, among many others. They do a heart transplant from one patient to another patient. Of course, the donor had died in an accident of some sort. They take the heart, put it in the body of a new patient. Yes? The new patient develops habits and memories that belong to the donor. So one example is this person who did not like beer and did not consume alcohol at all and did not do X and Y and Z. and he had some sort of heart problem and needed a heart transplant. And the donor was a biker who loved beer, and he was a young guy, and so on and so forth. And the recipient of the heart developed a craving, unsatisfiable craving for beer and fried foods and bar foods and that kind of thing. And it was unexplainable until the doctor himself, who did the transplant surgery, became very inquisitive and actually dug up the history of the donor and find out all of this information. And there are hundreds of these stories, hundreds. Okay? Which proves what? Which proves some of our behavior is biological. Biological. That means you do not choose it, because you don't choose your biology. Not fully anyway. Okay. That's another study by a Nobel Prize. Your relationship with your parents affects how the structure of the brain, not just your thoughts, the actual structure of the brain develops. And then most of us have heard of something called, this is the study of Pottinger, by the way. It's published in a book. It's very, very interesting, and I highly recommend that you read it. This is the Maslow triangle. How many people have seen this before or know about it? Raise your hand, please. Maslow triangle. You all need to know this. Yes, thank you. Alhamdulillah, some sisters in the back. Basically, it says, biologically speaking, the human being is driven by at least 5 levels of needs, basic needs. You are going to follow through on the sequence, whether you like it or not, whether you're aware of it or not. The first, most basic physiological needs at the bottom. You need to be able to provide shelter. You need to be able to provide oxygen to breathe. You need food. You need clothing, and you need sleep. These are biological needs. If you don't have them, nothing else matters. This is the highest priority for you. The next level of priority is what? Safety and security. So now that I have a shelter and I can breathe and I have water and food and right, now I have to make sure I'm living in a healthy way. Then I seek employment, then I seek to own a property to secure my shelter basically, and to start thinking about family and social ability. If someone is homeless, they don't think about family. That's not their highest concern. By the way, there's a smell of coffee that's absolutely delicious.
Somebody get up some coffee.
Thank you. I, for some reason, this is a biological need. This is my biological need right now. I didn't have enough coffee today.
It's your grandfather's.
Okay, so the third level is love and belonging, right? Once I secured the second level, now I move into social needs. I need to have friends. I need to belong to a group, identity. All of that stuff become a third level, right? So, let me ask you a question. If you are a tyrant dictator in one of the many countries, unfortunately, where most Muslims live today, where do you want to keep people? At the bottom level, right? Worried about securing their food, worried about securing their water, worried about whether or not they have oxygen to breathe, literally. I was talking to a friend of mine, not a friend, an acquaintance who was asking my advice about nutritional matters, and she was telling me that she has an autistic son, and the son required a certain type of formula, which has been available and is available for 20, 30 years all over the world. But right now, she was willing to pay the equivalent of $90 for one can of it, and she couldn't find it. So this is one example, of course. In Syria, for example, I grew up in Lebanon, but it was very common for my Syrian friends and people that I knew to come to Lebanon shopping for bread, because the Syrian bread that was available was horrible, to be honest with you. So they would come and buy the Lebanese type of bread because they preferred it, and they would buy quantities. And I never understood this as a young kid. until I figured out that this is the purpose. Keep them busy at the lower levels. Why? So they don't climb up and ask for the higher levels. What's at the higher levels? We're talking biology here, okay? We're talking our basic driven needs, and Abraham Maslow has actually proven this a long time ago, 60, 70 years ago. So after you pass the love and belonging, you seek self-esteem. You want to be respected. After you receive that respect, then you seek what's called self-actualization. What's self-actualization? The desire to give, the desire to express yourself in the world, the desire to help others. That's above and beyond self-esteem. You cannot reach number 5 until you've satisfied number 4. You cannot reach number 4 until you've satisfied number 3. Yes? The exception is, I'm here to tell you that Islam teaches us that we can overcome this. Because if you were to place La ilaha illallah correctly, the radical monotheism that I talked about. Remember, the word radical means what?
Rooted.
Rooted in the truth, right? Rooted deeply. Not radical in the sense of extremism. No, radical in the sense of true and disciplined monotheism. Where does La ilaha illallah belong on that level? 4 or 5, right? It's 4 or 5. Because it's about self-esteem, and it's about expressing yourself so that Allah وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَى اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ. Allah will see your actions. So that's a form of expressing La ilaha illallah. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but I assure you that Islam offers us to overcome these biological limitations. So Maslow says this is a biological limitation. Islam teaches us, no, there's a way to overcome it. Did you have a question? Okay. All right. This is another book I highly recommend reading. Basically, I'm going to summarize it very quickly. We're still in the biological aspect. This work by Daniel Pink, in association, if I'm not mistaken, with the Gallup organization. Gallup, survey, statistical organization. To summarize the whole thing, basically they said, what motivates employees who work in the knowledge industry? I'm not talking about assembly workers. I'm talking about people who think and use more of their brain, which is a proxy for what motivates people to be happy in life. Okay? What causes these knowledge workers to be productive and engaged and happy at work? And he found three answers. The first one is the sense of autonomy. I have freedom to be inventive, to create things, to do things that are according to my innovation, my way of doing things. I'm not told every single detail to follow. Autonomy, independence, freedom. Second one is a sense of purpose. A sense of purpose. In the khutbah today, I talked about the high rate of suicide. By the way, we talked about the military suicide being 20 per day. You know what the percentage is? It's 30 per 100,000 per year. So every year, 30 out of 100,000 servicemen will commit suicide. Every year. You know what the general population is? The general population rate is 13. So almost 2.5 times, 250% higher among the service people. And that did not happen before 2004. So it's not something that has been with us for a long time. The problem is their purpose is not aligned with the biological need for a good sense of purpose. Does this make sense now?
Yes.
Because they know what they're doing is not right. They know, at least those who... By the way, the people who talk, this is a report by the VA, I'm not inventing these numbers. The people, the military servicemen and women, and active and veterans, they did a study how many people have thought about suicide. The number is 30%. 30%. The average population is between 5 and 7%. The average normal adult population in the US. 5 and 7%. Think about it.
Without medication. Without being on medication.
Yeah. Normal. I'm talking about, so 30% actually are not happy with their purpose, with their sense of purpose. And this is not after they leave, some of them during active military. So it's the purpose for which they're not aligned with. Number 3 is the sense of mastery. I'm growing. We talked about this in the form of tazkiyah, right? The Quran talks about tazkiyah. So we have a drive. These are all 3 drives. So I gave you the Maslow, which is 5 levels, and I gave you the Dan Pink, which is 3 levels, 3 different things. And they're different things, but they're both based in biology. So now let's move on to society and conditioning, cultural conditioning. Let me tell you about this interesting experiment. Most of you have heard about the monkeys experiment, the monkeys in the cold shower. Who has heard about this? Monkeys in cold shower. It's a really interesting story. You guys should read a lot, or should invite me more. I don't know. So they brought a bunch of monkeys, they put them in a large cage, they put a ladder in the middle, the picture on the left, and they put bananas at the very top of the ladder. And then they put a very cold shower on top of that cage. As soon as the first monkey tried to climb that cage, they doused all the other monkeys with the cold water, and the water did not stop until the monkey trying to climb was pulled down. Second day, same thing. They put a banana. Another monkey tried to climb, cold shower. They figured out, hey, when somebody is trying to climb, we need to pull him down, otherwise the water will not stop. The third day, the monkey tried to climb. Before the water fired, they were all on top of him to drag him down. So far so good? So they got the lesson that in order to avoid water, you should not allow any monkey to climb up. Bananas or no bananas, it doesn't matter. The second phase of the experiment, they took one of the monkeys and introduced a brand new member of that group who did not know about the rules. They put a banana on top of the ladder. That monkey innocently, walked over and tried to think about climbing, and they all jumped on him and prevented him. No cold shower. But the monkey didn't know why they pulled him down. He just thought or understood that it's forbidden
to climb.
They replaced another member, and so on and so forth, until all the members were new. None of the old team, none of the old first cold shower team was in the cage anymore. And the rule applied. Every time they put a banana, if anybody dared to think about it, they all rush, prevent him from climbing on the ladder. No water. No more water. There's no water involved at all anymore. Now they replaced the second team of monkeys, one by one, with a third generation. And the third generation followed in the same pattern. No water, just they prevented each other from climbing the ladder without knowing why. So the third generation had no idea why they were doing it. What does that tell you? How does the Quran talk about this? إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ لَمُهْتَدُونَ. In another ayah, إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ لَمُقْتَدُونَ. We have found our forefathers doing certain behaviors, and we are following in their way. In another ayah, we are guided by following their way. So it's a pride, it's a point of pride. Does this make sense? This is called social conditioning. Do we suffer from this?
Yeah.
How much do you think we suffer from this? Honestly. Who says 10%? Raise your hand.
10%.
10%.
Only?
I'm just saying. How about 40%?
No more.
How about 60%? How about 90%? That's more like, my opinion is at least 90%, if not more.
We're living back home, but because we changed culture.
I've lived, one of the interesting things about what happened to me in the last 8 years, because I lived in the United States for 30 years, and then traveled back in 2011, and I've been living in the Middle East for 7.5 years. The anthropologists, you know what anthropologists are? They study the history of civilizations. They have a really interesting clause or statement they make. They say that you cannot understand who you are until you immerse yourself in a foreign culture and look from the outside in. That's exactly what I did. I lived in Lebanon as I was a kid. At 21 years old, I came to the United States, lived for 30 years approximately, so I became this new thing. And then I went back and looked at myself. But I also went back and looked at my both selves. The original, 21-year-old who left Lebanon, and the American who lived in the United States for 30 years. So I was able to look at both. And I found amazing things. And one of the things that drove me to do this investigation for the last 10 years, to be honest with you, is this understanding. So we are conditioned in unbelievable ways to act in certain ways that are subconscious. Hypnotized into behaving in a certain way without even thinking about it. Question is, do we have free will? That was my real question that I was pursuing.
Yes, we do.
We'll see. We're only at number 5, so wait. So, by the way, I'm not going to be able to talk a lot about this, but this is there's amazing research done by one German guy called Geert Hofstede. I didn't put him in this presentation, and another British lady called Mary Douglas. She did some amazing work on describing social cultures. So cultures, how do we define cultures? And she, according to her, she divided all of the cultures in the world, all of the civilizations and societies in the world into 4 categories, according to these 2 axes. So the middle axis, she called grid, meaning caste. The Indian caste system they talk about, social classes. Here we talk about middle class, lower class, upper class, but in some other countries they have many, many different classes, right? They call them castes. In Lebanon, for example, you have the politician, quote-unquote, corrupt class at the very top, which exists in most countries from that part of the world. And then you have the really pious class at the very bottom. And then you have the middle who have whatever you want to call it, mixed values, okay? They're opportunistic. They're free to behave according to looking up or looking down. So you have different classes, and these different classes are very strict. You know very well when you live in the Middle East which class you belong to. I also lived and worked part-time in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, you know exactly which class you are. They have clans, tribes, right? You know exactly. Okay, the second axis on the horizontal is loyalty. How much loyalty do you have? So for example, I always say that, the Turkish civilization has a lot of loyalty among its citizens, right? Asabiyya in Arabic. Asabiyya. As a matter of fact, Ibn Khaldun talks exactly about this. He says, the main reason why Islam needed the Arab culture in order for it to spread and grow is because of Asabiyya, of this loyalty, high loyalty within the Arabs at that time. And he explains history. This is Ibn Khaldun, not me. He explains history that Islam did not need the Arabs as soon as it grew beyond a certain borders. So all sorts of other non-Arabs took over the commands of the history of Islam. Mary Douglas divides all the civilizations according to this grid. So on the top left. If you have low loyalty and you have high grid, right? Imagine yourself, you're really in the lowest class, for example, and you hate everybody in your society. You tend to be fatalistic, Jabriyin. She calls them fatalistic. So most of their behavior basically tends to be emotional, fatalistic. You know what fatalistic is? It's, there's no use. I'm not gonna work hard. Nothing's gonna change. I'm not gonna have a lot of hope. That's fatalistic. I'm telling you right now, I watch people in Lebanon and in Syria, by the way, among the refugees that I work with in Lebanon, who are 90% fatalistic. They have low loyalty and high grid. They feel locked in, hopeless. So they become fatalistic. On the opposite end, egalitarian, on the right, bottom right. That's the Americans. Low caste, you're not locked into a certain class. At least theoretically, right? But if you ask an average person, can you do things to get out of your class? And the answer, absolutely yes. You have high loyalty or low loyalty. Average American person has high loyalty. They would fit in the egalitarian section. What does egalitarian mean? They believe that there is equity among all types of humans. Okay, I'm not going to say much more about this, but these traits and attributes actually cause you to think differently about your decisions. I hope this message got through. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to continue. If you want to leave, feel free to leave. I'm going to continue at least till 9 o'clock. Let's talk about the gut microbiome, or what's called the microbiota. The microbiota, by the way, how many of you know how much microbes do we have inside our body? How many pounds? Yes, Mahmoud? Between 3 and 5 pounds. So imagine a bag of potatoes, 3 to 5 pounds. If you scrape your intestines from the inside, that's how much microbes you have. Actually, that's not all. We have microbes on our skin, we have microbes in our hair, in our other organs. Any kind of opening, any kind of exposure, we have microbes. Okay? These microbes, this is the interesting part, and this is the diagram on the right-hand side. So the microbiota here that we're talking about is inside the intestines. So on the bottom, you look at the blue cells. These are the cells. These are the human cells in blue. This is the intestinal, what's called epithelium, which is a single cell layer. Okay, just imagine that you have skin. You have skin on the outside. You also have skin on the inside of your digestive tract. Okay, inside that skin, you have the opening, right? The whole digestive opening. So imagine a hose which has an opening on the inside and a skin on the outside. Our skin is the skin on the outside of the hose. The opening inside is the inside of our digestive tract. So you're actually exposed from the inside and from the outside. Make sense? So you're more like a hose than a real body. So far so good? The amazing part is that your skin, if you measure the surface area of your skin, it's about 2 square meters. About a little larger than this rug. All of your skin. If you measure the surface area of your digestive tract, including these little villi and all of the exposures and all of the different bends and curves and stuff like that, it is equivalent to a tennis court, not just a prayer room. So there's a whole lot more skin on the inside exposed to what? Microbes, which is why the body and nature and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connected 60% of our nervous system to that surface. So 60% of our nervous system is connected to the inside of our digestive tract. Not only nervous system, that means it's connected to your brain via a direct highway called the vagus nerve, by the way, which is right there, the second one from the right, the vagus nerve. They used to think that the brain told the intestines what to do. Afwan? V-A-G-U-S. Vagus. They discovered that for every one fiber going down from the brain to the intestines, there are nine fibers going up from the intestines to the brain. That means who's talking to who? Intestines are telling the brain, not the other way around. Dr. Gundry has a YouTube, about 45 minutes, actually 2 of them. He calls the intestines, the gut, the first brain. Don't be amazed. The Quran says, إِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ وَلَكِنْ تَعْمَى الْقُلُوبِ الَّتِي فِي الصُّدُورِ. It's not the eyes that go blind, it is the hearts inside the chests that go blind. Perhaps this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about. I don't know. The point is, moving on, the microbiome regulates your neurodevelopment. It regulates, when you digest certain foods, there are things you cannot digest. By the way, when a mother nurses a baby, they discovered that 10% of the milk of the mother, the human milk, has sugar that is undigestible by the baby. The baby cannot digest it. It doesn't have the equipment for it, unless it has the right microbes. So in other words, the mother produces 10% of her milk to feed not the baby, but the microbes inside the baby. Wallahi, you hear about these things, you say, subhanallah. Why? Because they're friendly, because they're important for our development, because they help us. They're not here to kill us. So all of this detol and pasteurization and all of this stuff is anti-life. Actually, antibodies, or what do you call them? Antibiotics, thank you. Literally is a Latin word that means anti-life. Okay. They produce essential foods, they digest essential foods, they produce essential vitamins and hormones and neurotransmitters. For example, you heard of serotonin? What is serotonin? It's the feel happy hormone. And it's a predecessor for melatonin, which is what causes you to sleep well. 90% of serotonin, 90% is produced by the bacteria in the gut. 90%.
The good bacteria.
The good bacteria, of course. So when you go taking antibiotics willy-nilly and you kill this bacteria, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to feel good because you're lacking on serotonin.
Eat yogurt.
I'm sorry?
Eat yogurt.
Eat yogurt.
Well, maybe.
Natural.
So these little bacteria, microbiomes, and the microbes in the microbiome are very important to how we behave, because if you're not happy, you're depressed. If you're not sleeping well, you can't think clearly. Am I right or am I wrong?
You're correct.
So this is behavior that is being affected by not you, but your microbes. By the way, how many cells, all of these microbes, if you take nothing from today, just remember this one, because it really floored me when I heard it. How many cells do we have in our human body? Approximately 10 trillions. 10 trillion. A trillion is 12 zeros. Okay? So 10 followed by 12 zeros. How many cells of microbes do we have? 100 trillion. So 1 to 10. And they do all of these things. They help controlling your blood pressure, your blood sugar, they respond to certain medicine, they provide you vitamins and hormones and all sorts of things, right? So are you really human? If 90% of the cells in your body are non-human, are you really human?
الله سبحانه ولقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم.
I was just asking, you decide.
Well, if we're not human, what are we?
That's a good question. But look, this is science. These are facts that are established and not questioned by a whole lot of people. And they tell us things about our behavior. I mean, these things affect our behavior. As a matter of fact, you don't believe me. How many people know about the keto diet, ketogenic diet? Raise your hand, keep them up. MashaAllah. Do you follow it?
13 pounds in 9 days, Dave.
Good for you. Only 9 days?
9 days.
Very good. Ketogenic diet basically says avoid carbohydrates and sugar. I spent 5 years trying to convince my dear old mother. She's in her 70s. No, Mama, I cannot do without my bread. I need my bread. I need my bread. I feel, she says my stomach becomes swooshy without bread. So I said, just try it. Now 5 years trying to convince her. Finally, I convinced my sister, who was suffering from some health issues, and she, بقدرة قادر, convinced my mom. I told her the following thing. I said, look, there is bacteria in your microbiome that actually cries out for bread. It says, feed me, feed me, feed me. And as long as it's there, you're gonna be craving bread and sugar, and bread and sugar, and it's not gonna stop. So it's not you, it's the bacteria who's crying for it, which is absolutely true. I said, don't believe me, just give me 3 days without bread, without sugar. She did, and she no longer eats bread. See, that's why I explain. If you don't try it, and you probably have tried it, the meaning of hunger, which controls our behavior. I mean, imagine what happens when you're really hungry. When you're really hungry and blood sugar is low, like, move out of my way, don't stand in my way to that fridge, man. If you don't move, I'm gonna bite your head off. But after 3 days, the bacteria dies off. That bacteria. The feed me bread type of bacteria. And the definition of hunger changes dramatically. You don't feel hunger in the same way at all. And I didn't need anybody to convince me of this because I went through it. And my mother went through it. And now my mother is preaching the ketogenic diet. So she tells her sister and she brags to her nieces, and she's losing weight and she's starting to move better, alhamdulillah, and all sorts of things. I'm not selling you on the ketogenic diet. I'm telling you that the bacteria affects our behavior. It affects what we think we're asking for, what we think we cannot live with, what we think we're addicted to. The bacteria. Don't tell me you have free will in that area. You don't. Because I've lived it, I've experienced it. Without this bacteria, when the bacteria dies, you don't feel the hunger for this at all. So you don't believe me, try it for 3 days. Give yourself 3 full days without bread, without sugar. On the 4th day, you may suffer a little bit. Past the 4th day, you're not going to want to eat bread anymore. If you understand the damages caused by white bread and white sugar. You're going to stop automatically. That resistance becomes so much higher because the bacteria that was asking for it died off and went away. Try it and then you'll believe me. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I actually watched the video for Dr. Gandhi and I'm using his pre-bio, what he said. What do you think about it?
Okay, different lecture.
Well, I understand, but he brought Dr. Gandhi and he talks about the bacteria, and this enhances the good bacteria and actually suppresses the bad bacteria.
Different lecture.
That's what I'm taking.
Okay, let's talk seriously. Let's talk afterwards. There is a very dangerous, this is also still talking about microbiome. There's something called glyphosate. How many people have heard of glyphosate? Otherwise known as Roundup. Roundup herbicide, and the one you use in your lawn. In August 2018, just 3 months ago, a court in San Francisco granted, a court with jury, granted a plaintiff His name is, if I remember correctly, Dwayne Johnson. $279 million award for proving that glyphosate caused his cancer. What is glyphosate? Glyphosate is Roundup, which has been used since 1976. They claimed that it doesn't... Coffee? Hopefully it's the right
He's
smell.
not asking for it. The bacteria in your stomach is out.
That's right.
Extra sugar, right?
No sugar, habibi.
You said Dwayne Johnson, you mean The Rock?
Dwayne Johnson, that's his name. I don't know. No, it's not. No.
It was The Rock?
No, it's not. He ended up with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and he ended up being awarded $279 million against Monsanto, the company. And by the way, we're all exposed to it. We're all eating glyphosate every single day. Since I came from Lebanon, my whole body changed in many different ways. And I've noticed when I eat organic meat, I feel one way, and when I eat meat that I bought from whatever, Sam's Club or Costco or whatever, I feel a totally different way. And it's noticeable, and I can tell you that we're all exposed to this. What does this do? First of all, it kills a lot of the friendly bacteria, which has a lot of other effects, including psychological effects. But the most scary part is the fourth one, interferes with the protein manufacturing. And if you really believe we have free will, listen to this one. Listen to this one. What are proteins? Proteins are structures that make up our muscles, that go inside the cells, that go into the brain, that do all sorts of things. So for example, when you move your arm, it's actually the proteins that are folding in a certain way to cause the muscle to contract. Okay. Proteins, all proteins in the human being have a molecule called glycine, which looks very similar to glyphosate. Very similar. When glyphosate gets into the stomach and goes through the intestines, it causes openings in the stomach wall. Remember the blue cells that I showed you, the single cell layer, the epithelium? They open up. This glyphosate it causes it to open like that. It goes through into the blood, and it goes through into the cells, into the DNA. And as the DNA is manufacturing protein, glyphosate replaces itself instead of glycine. So those proteins are manufactured by the DNA, but they have glyphosate in them. So now they're enemy proteins. They're weird proteins, which the immune system recognizes them as weird, as enemies, and it starts attacking them. And wherever these proteins go, the immune system ends up attacking them.
This is in the food?
This is all our food, and in some water, and even in the air, it's suspected in the air. All of the vegetables, especially wheat, I can talk for hours on this, and it's very scary stuff, man. It's very satanic stuff. Let me finish this point. So now you follow me, the glyphosate got into the protein. So now it deformed the protein, so the protein doesn't function correctly anymore. The immune system recognizes it as a foreign enemy and it starts attacking it. The immune system ends up creating what's called autoimmune disease. Have you heard of these? Fibromyalgia, MS. Why did it increase all of a sudden in the last 40 years? Psoriasis, Crohn's, Alzheimer is suspected of being an autoimmune, schizophrenia. 190 diseases have been linked to this. 190 diseases. Very scary, excuse my word, very scary shit. Very scary. I'm not joking. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to wake you up. I promised you, I gave you the warning. By the time you leave, you're not going to be the same person you entered today.
Can you repeat what will it do?
The disease is linked.
That's autoimmune disease, what will it do?
This is the cause. This is the cause.
How do I avoid this?
How do I avoid it? Another lecture. It's a long discussion, but basically organic is the safest way to go. And by the way, those who eat hummus, yes, hummus, lentils are the worst. They're worse than meat because they come from Canada in the United States. They come from Canada, and Canada did a study on all the types of foods that contain glyphosate. Hummus, which is chickpeas and lentils, had levels of 20,000 times the allowed rates.
And beans.
Come on, all beans. All beans. Wheat is horrible. What they do, here's what they do. Here's how you need to understand it. There are two types of crops. I know this is not the main point of the lecture, but you really need to understand how this is affecting our behavior, and this is the point of the lecture. Glyphosate is sprayed on crop to kill undesirable weeds. Makes sense, right? It's like Roundup, you shoot it on the dandelions in the lawn and so on. So there are two types of crops on which they use this. Crops that die at the end of the season, like beans and peas and wheat, yes? And soybeans and cotton and canola. Anything that dies, where the plant dies, so animals, yes? They spray this stuff on them. Why? Because if you own 1,000 acres, imagine you own 1,000 acres of wheat. Imagine, yes? Do you think all 1,000 acres will become mature and ready to harvest at exactly the same day? Of course not. But if you're a farmer and you need to rent these big, large equipment to come and harvest your field, what is in your interest? To do it all in 1 or 2 or 3 days, right? Not to spread it over 2 weeks, because that'll cost you a lot of money. So they hire airplanes that spray this stuff from the air to kill this crop. Literally, they call it desiccation. They kill it, and as a side effect, the plant germinates or matures faster. In other words, when the plant senses it's about to die, it pushes its seeds faster. بيستوي بسرعة أكتر. So they end up with bigger yield. So they get more wheat as a result of spraying this stuff. But this stuff sticks to the plant and gets absorbed by the plant. And how many wheat beans do you buy that has been washed? The answer is 0. They don't wash wheat because they want it dry. They don't want it wet. They want to mill it dry. They don't want to mill it wet. They spray the field again before they plant the seeds. So they spray the fields twice. Once before they plant the seeds, once before they harvest. Now, corn. Corn is a different story. Corn and soybeans and a couple of other crops. Oats. Oats is another one. And cotton. The cotton you're wearing has been sprayed tremendously by glyphosate. But let's talk about corn. Corn has been modified genetically. Corn and soy, they're the worst. Corn and soy has been modified genetically. Why? Because they want to be able to spray them with Roundup without the plant dying. All the other plants die, but corn and soy do not die. So they modified them genetically to be able to absorb glyphosate without dying. That glyphosate remains in the corn and in the soy. Now, what happens to you when you eat it? They did studies and they found that 80% of what goes through your mouth never comes out. 80%. And it accumulates. Scary shit, man. I'm telling you, it's very scary. Excuse my language, but it's very scary stuff. What can you do? First, be aware of this. Go study, and there are many other solutions. We'll talk more about them some other time. Does this affect your behavior? You betcha.
Of course.
It affects 190 diseases. A lot of them are psychological. It does affect your behavior. And I'm telling you, I felt it. In the last 2 months, I've been going through this experimentation on myself. I eat certain things and I observe what happens. Forgive my graphic description. Even my trips to the bathroom are different when I eat certain things versus other things. I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. Okay. How are we doing on time? So 15 more minutes.
I have a question. So,
This is another SHIT type of products, and you can investigate it yourself. Tafadhal, Habib.
well, my question is, what this has to do with Shirk now? I mean, why it's like we're not getting the point now, like we're so distracted now.
Does it affect your behavior?
It does, of course.
Okay. Does it make you do things you're not aware why you're doing them?
Well, it might. It's not.
It might, okay.
It's not
Do
fact.
you remember the verse that says, هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في. In other words, you do things for the wrong motives. You do things without knowing why you're doing them. It affects your behavior. It makes you do things that without them you wouldn't do them. Do you at least get that level? Wait. Do you at least get that level? It causes your behavior to change without your awareness. This is key important, right? And what I said is that if you do things without knowing why you're doing them, that could be shirk, or at the least, it's a wasted part of your life.
It's not really Shirk. I mean, how Shirk is. It's not really connected, because if we go to the Quran, it's your anchor, yes? So you're anchored to the Quran.
Inshallah.
So if you stay anchored, then, those things like sciences, I think it will change your behavior, but I don't know how it will make you, increase or, like,
Okay, let me give it.
as Shirk.
Fair.
Description as Shirk is
Fair.
making.
Let me give
Yes,
you.
it's like
It's a very good question. So the question is, how is this related to shirk? At least we understand that some of these things change your behavior.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. So let's go back to the medicine that I called SSRI. Remember?
Yes.
Selective serotonin. And I said it causes loss of inhibition. That means normally I wouldn't come near this, but on SSRI I would. Okay. I've seen people, Muslims, do unacceptable things and even alcohol and all sorts of things because they found it was okay now. I'm not telling you to believe me. I'm just telling you I've seen it. If you go read the side effects of that medicine, loss of inhibition is one of them. So I'm not making it up. Loss of inhibition makes you do things that normally you would not do. In other words, that part of your life is wasted. Because we read the verse, right? So at a minimum, you need to be aware of this waste, possible waste, and study it and avoid it. If you tie it back to the verse where we said, وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاهُمْ بَعْدَ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ فَمَا لَكَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ وَلِيٍّ وَلَا وَاقٍ. Right? If you follow their whims, right? Somebody is making you do things that you don't want to do. You follow them. After what you've learned of the knowledge that has arrived to you, then don't ask for a protector from Allah. So you take it all together, it makes it mandatory that we learn this stuff. I hope so. This is my opinion, and that's why I spend my time and I'm sharing it with you. Yes.
I don't want to prolong the discussion, but I think what he means is I think we're making a fine line here between making everything here haram, which
I
is a
didn't
shirk.
use that word at all.
Yeah, I think that's what probably the clarification that has to happen from Brother Bahjat's question is, if you do these things, it's not haram, you're not going to go to hell, but you have to be aware of the changes that happening around us
And impact you.
and impact us.
Yes.
And yeah,
Does that make sense? So you were with us from the beginning, right? Because we talked about all of these issues before. Alhamdulillah.
Brother Hany,
Yes, sir. Habib.
in essence, if you're leading that we're really not mukhayyareen, musayyarin by the genetics, I just quit.
Well,
Technically speaking, we shouldn't be punished for something we don't control.
yes, and that's exactly the final conclusion I want to reach to here. That I have showed you, and I will show you, 12 different things that cause you to behave in subconsciously weird ways. Cause you to behave subconsciously in ways that you wouldn't choose to behave if you had your full 100% faculty. What does Allah do with this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the verse that the sister reminded us, يَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُعَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. There is a determination and submission that Allah will do what He pleases. There's another verse that I like a lot, وَهُوَ أَسْرَعُ الْحَاسِبِينَ. He is the fastest of those who compute. Meaning, He's aware of all of these, factors influencing you. And He knows how to sort them out. So don't beat up on yourself. That's one of the conclusions I want to reach. Another third conclusion, does that absolve you of your responsibility? Absolutely not. First, you have to be aware of these things. Why? Because it affects your life. So if your wife is taking SSRI and you see weird behavior, after today you have no excuse to accept it. Does that make sense? No, but at least be aware of it. Or your sister, or your whoever, right? Or your brother, it could be men. There is the next bunch of slides, really interesting stuff. Here's actually, let me take your question, Brother Mahmoud, and then we'll get into this. Fadal.
Just also a disclaimer that there are situations where weighing the benefit versus the risk of taking certain medication, you might
Absolutely.
have to do it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely, but be aware of those side effects which affect behavior.
Should have critical thinking, should
Yes.
know, don't, there's no
Don't
silver
throw the
bullet.
pills away.
Yes.
Don't throw the pills away.
Yeah, the doctors are first to,
Okay, let me talk about something really weird and really fun. Anybody heard of toxoplasmosis? Toxoplasma gondii. Yes, you heard? You heard of it? It is really fascinating. It's actually a parasite. It's like a worm from cats. Pregnant women are not allowed to go near the litter box if they have cats at home.
Yep.
Actually, it's not recommended to have cats at home if you're pregnant. Why? Because of this parasite that transfers from the cat feces to the humans. But it also transfers to rats and mice, who happen to like feces. They like them, except cat feces. However, if they eat cat feces that has this parasite, toxoplasmosis happens to them, and that rat becomes in love with cat urine and cat feces. So they seek them out, which makes them an easy prey for the cat. So this parasite goes from the cat into the rat, and it makes the rat easy to catch for the cat. Why? It's funny.
Addiction.
Because it wants to get back into the cat. It goes out through the feces, but it can only reproduce in the stomach of the cat. So it wants to go back. It cannot go up from the bottom to the top, you imagine what I'm saying. So it has to go back through the mouth. Very intelligent. Tell me this is evolution. Now, what happens when a human being consumes it?
Talk about the parasite or the mouse? You're talking about the parasite wants to go back inside the cat.
Yes, yes. And it manipulates the behavior of the rat to start having more interest.
Craving and so.
More interest in the cat smell. Normal rats are scared by the cat smell. They run away like you wouldn't believe. Except if they have this parasite. It affects their brain, and their brain makes them do things that they normally don't do. By the way, there are dozens of these types of stories in nature. The previous picture that I showed you, this This is another one. This is a wasp that plants a certain toxin in the, what do you call it? The ladybug, the lady beetle, the ladybug, and it plants the egg right behind the brain, and it grows, and it eats some of the inside of the beetle, not all, and then comes out, and when it comes out, that beetle weaves the cocoon for the baby of the wasp. So this egg and this parasite that was inserted by the wasp inside the beetle makes the beetle behave as a guardian for the baby of the wasp. And when the baby of the wasp exits this cocoon, guess what the first thing they do is? They eat the ladybug. Normal ladybugs don't do this. They don't have these cocoons and they don't behave this way at all. Except when they are infected by this wasp. So there are tons of these examples. Now, go back to this. I want to finish with this. Toxoplasma candii, what happens when it becomes part of a human being? And by the way, 60% of human beings have this. 60%. They discovered that when a human being, if you're a male, you display increased risk-taking behavior. They discovered that a lot of the motorcycle accidents victims, men, have this toxoplasmosis. They end up taking more risk in their motorcycle driving.
Daredevils.
Yes, they become more daredevils. Women have another behavior. And by the way, they don't know how to explain these things. But these are documented changes in behaviors.
And this comes only from cats or some other things?
The life cycle goes through the cat and the rat and the human being and so on. And then other animals. They discovered them in the sea otters and they discovered them in other animals.
Gets into fish?
Yes, for the same kind of purpose. You know, it uses one organism to get back into the original organism and back and forth.
Is it transmitted only by eating or by touching?
Well, in the case of a human, by inhaling, by smelling. Yes, that's why a pregnant woman should not go near a cat's litter box. Airborne, yes. For some reason, the US military is interested in this.
You know the reason.
This was reported by Robert Sapolsky, by the way. It's not my words.
You said that women have a different effect on them?
Yes. Increased promiscuity.
What does that mean?
Okay. Do you feel like thinking a little bit? I'm gonna put up a test. I'm gonna put up a test. Hello? I'm gonna put up the test and I'm gonna take it away after 20 seconds. I want you to read the test. Please focus. Stay with me, huh? Focus. Read the test and then I'm gonna ask you immediately afterwards what the answer is. Okay? This is about cognitive biases. We're number 7 now, right? Not 7 out of 12, remember? Okay, here we go. So, read the test. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Who says 10 cents? Raise your hand. Quick. Keep them up. Keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Don't be afraid. Come on, raise your hand. 17. Who thinks 10 is wrong? 10 is wrong.
10 what? You mean
10 is wrong. The answer, how much does the ball cost? It's very obvious, right?
10 cents is wrong.
Who thinks 10 cents is wrong? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Come on, you raised your hand before. I saw you. Okay. Who wants to tell me, the gentleman in the back, why is it wrong?
It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. So you did the checking, right? So if you say the ball costs 10 cents, correct? The bat costs $1 more. So how much does the bat cost? No, $1.10. A whole dollar more. So 10 cents plus 1 is 1/10.
ball and the bat cost $1.10.
That's right. And the bat costs $1 more.
Then the ball.
That's the question. You did not read that question.
It's okay. It's okay. No, please. Wait.
No, but it's 5 cents.
No, please watch. Watch what's going on. I want you to understand what's going on.
I would love to understand.
Okay, so read it carefully. The first fact, please stay with me, Malish. I know you're tired, but stay with me. This is a very important part of this exercise. So, Brother Ibrahim. So, together they cost $1.10.
Yes.
The bat is $1 more than the ball. This is the second statement.
Got it.
So, how much does the ball cost? So, together they have to be $1.10.
Right, okay.
So, if the ball is 10 cents, add $1 for the price of the bat, that becomes $1.10 for the bat. Add back the 10 cents for the ball, that becomes $1.20.
That's why I left the video.
So you understand what happened. This is why I'm going through this very carefully with him. Because this is...
I didn't get it yet.
I didn't want to.
No, because you said it's $1.10 for the bat and the ball. So if you're telling me it's $1 for the bat more than the ball, so still, the 10 cents is still there. Huh?
10 cents plus $1, 110.
Yeah.
110 plus the original 10 cents that you
120.
So, okay, let me give you the answer. The answer is 5 cents.
I want to make sure my kids don't go there.
Okay, so the right answer is 5 cents. Here's why. Because $1 plus 5 cents is $1.05. That's the price of the bat. $1.05 is the price of the bat. No, please stay with me. This is so important. Just stay with me. This is not about the joke. I'm doing an exercise to illustrate something.
We're trying to follow.
So 5 cents for the ball, you add $1 for the bat, that becomes $1.05 for the bat. You add them together, that becomes $1.10.
So what does it say 5 cents for the ball?
It's clear, guys.
You know what we just observed? Wait, stay. Wait. Shh. Guys, stay with me, okay? It's not about the joke. I'm trying to illustrate something. It's called cognitive bias. We think we know the answer when we think quick. But in reality, if we go backward and verify the answer, we find out it's wrong. So this is actually detailed. Please listen to this. This is so important. This is detailed in a book called Fast and Slow Thinking by Daniel Kahneman. Now let me remove this. Okay? And again, you're going to see this. Actually, let me do this. Fast and Slow Thinking. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Who is this Daniel Kahneman? Please pay attention. Please pay attention. Daniel Kahneman was an Israeli scientist who discovered this science with a partner of his in 1967. They kept it secret for 30 years. They used it in military, they used it in government decision making, they used it in all sorts of other applications, and they kept it hidden from the rest of the world for 30 years until his partner died and he had to publish this book, and then he won the Nobel Prize Award for it in 2004. This is not a joke. This is about discovering how our brain works in a faulty way. It's called, he created a whole field called behavioral economics. Behavioral economics. And it teaches you how your brain can be easily tricked in all sorts of ways. As a matter of fact, he identified 188 cognitive biases that we're not even aware of. And this is a graph, you'll get it in the presentation. A graph put together that summarizes this whole book. Of course, they're just titles and you need to understand what each one is. But I'll give you one quick example. What we just discovered is called the fast thinking bias. So $1 and $1.10, the difference is so easy to figure out. It's 10 cents, so I throw the number and I don't stop to check. That's a bias. In Quran, that's called hawa. In other words, if we had a military situation where two leaders were debating how to behave, what quick decision they have to make, this would have created tens of thousands of people dead, based on hawa. Okay, that's why I wanted you to watch what was going on, because it's real life. And I'm sorry, I'm pointing at you, but I went through the same thing. My brother, by the way, stayed for 2 days, refusing to admit that it's 5 cents. And my brother is a general in the army in Lebanon. I love him to death, but he just would not accept it for 2 days. So you're not alone at all. It's a bias. It's a way our brain is formed to think quickly in certain situations, and with some people we get attached to that quick thinking and refuse to step back and analyze if that was the right decision or not.
How many people did he kill?
Alhamdulillah, he was not in the military side of the army, he was in the logistics side of the army. Okay, so you get the point? So here's another example. Affirmation bias. How many we see people who are convinced of something ahead of time and they go look for evidence for it? They go look for evidence and say, see, I told you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the right way of doing it is the other way around. You look for evidence, we all fall into it, by the way. We all fall into it. This is a cognitive bias. It's a way that our brain is created and could easily fall into making these mistakes.
Perceptions.
So we have, at least so far from this discussion, we have 188 pathways of falling into hawa. Does this make sense now? Does this make sense? Well, it's serious science, it's serious knowledge that could affect our behavior. And don't tell me that if I'm not aware of it, then it's okay. Because it's affecting your life and your behavior, affects your epigenetics, as I showed you, your genes, which affects your descendants, and so on and so forth. So these are not innocent mistakes. If you can learn to avoid them, if you can learn to at least recognize them. In the next board meeting, I applied this, by the way. One of the consulting practices that I offer is executive decision quality assurance. Executive decision quality assurance. They hired me to sit in a board meeting, and I just observed. And at the end of the meeting, I produced a report where decisions were made in the wrong way. Not that the decisions were wrong. Please pay attention to me. But the decisions were made in the wrong way. So for example, the Quran tells us, after the battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ did not want to go into battle, but the young men who did not participate in the battle of Badr were interested in the anfal, in the spoils of war, bounty. So they pushed very hard. Yeah, we beat them last time, we can beat them again this time. The Prophet ﷺ yielded and went into war, and the result, 72 of the companions were killed in that battle. He himself was injured, and very few people did not flee. The second day he came back to Medina, and then he gathered another army and went in pursuit of the unbelievers of Quraysh and kicked them out of the area. Quran came afterwards, was revealed, verses were revealed about this issue. The Quran says, فبما نعمة من الله لنت لهم فبما نعمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك It was a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you were lenient and easygoing with them. Who is them? The young men who wanted to go to war but pushed the Prophet, right? So he yielded to them. فَبِمَا نَعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ.
I think it's rahmah.
فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ. جزاك الله خير. Thank you so much. It was a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you yielded to them. Okay. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Had you been hard-hearted and harsh in your behavior, they would have dispersed from around you. Fair enough? The verse continues. فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ. Forgive them. وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. Ask forgiveness for them. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Seek their advice again in future decisions. You with me? Seek their advice again in future decisions. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran teaches us how to do QA on decision making. One of them is shura, consult. Why? Why do we need to consult? Is it democracy? No, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows you have 188 cognitive biases, and the best way to disinfect your decisions is to expose them to as much consultation with other people as possible. So in other words, this decision in here, if we put it to a group decision, after a few minutes the whole group will come up with the right answer. Make sense? The group disinfects these cognitive biases. That's why shura is important. Not because it's democracy inherited from the West. Allah knew better. Allah knows how we were created. So individually you may not have a perfect way of thinking, but collectively your chances of doing the right decision goes a lot higher. Make sense now?
Of course.
Oh.
If it's collective decision making?
Yes, collective decision making. Yes. Time is running out, so
How's the online group communication that limits the diverse thinking when people, and especially young people, they group online where they leave the diverse thinking around them and they just focus on one thinking and they think that's the whole...
Absolutely, and Google is playing a role in this. As a matter of fact, you know about this, right? There's a theory right now among social scientists that the reason we have a lot of divisions, very sharp divisions within society in the US, actually in the whole world, is because the algorithm for search in Google, let's say you search for keys, okay? Tomorrow, you search for wallet, it tries to find wallets that allow keys to be stored in it. So the algorithm in Google is fully aware of your past history and tries to give you more of what it thinks you want.
This is the whole marketing world.
Absolutely. The problem is if you go searching for liberal articles, tomorrow it'll give you 10 more.
Yep.
And the next day 100 more. So if you were 10% liberal, now you're 80% liberal. Right? And if you started 10% conservative, in 2-3 days, 2-3 months, you're that much more conservative.
Radical.
More separation within society. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is not coincidental. Again, if you end up being, Tea Party supporter, because misinformation given and thrown at you by Google.
This is what the whole marketing world is.
I know, but this is part of behavior that you're not aware you're being subjected to. If you were left alone, you would not behave that way.
Of course.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So, how are we doing? We are at slide number 47, and there's 76 total slides. So, I'm gonna stop because this was designed for a whole day type of presentation.
How about tomorrow? Come tomorrow and finish.
Wallahi, I'm willing because we have a lot of fun things coming. One of them is common sense. One of them is intentional indoctrination.
عشان خلاص انا دماغي عايز اخرج مع اصحاب كده ومجتمع
I'll close with this story. And this is a fun story that my father taught me. Allah yarham. I will close with this just to kind of make you think. This is called the drifting intentions. And it's something I named it. I don't know if but everybody in psychology knows about this. So the story is this sheikh lived in a cottage at the edge of town, and his neighbor was close to him, but really didn't bother him. He didn't bother his neighbor. Every morning, the sheikh wakes up at Fajr. He goes outside the house to a nearby tree in his yard, his own yard, but the tree is very close to his neighbor's house. But it's his tree in his yard, sheikh. And he does adhan at the loudest voice possible. And then he stands and prays there. He loved it. Birds are singing, everybody is happy around him, except who? The neighbor. So one day, Shaitan didn't like this at all. So Shaitan shows up in the image, in the body of, you guessed it, his neighbor. Says, I don't want you to do this anymore. No, the sheikh says, sorry, but it's not up to you. Yes, it is. No, it's not. They wrestle. Guess who wins? The sheikh wins. Shaitan, leaves, comes back the next morning. As soon as he is doing the adhan, Shaitan in the image of the neighbor comes, does the same thing. They wrestle, the sheikh wins, Shaitan leaves. The third day, Shaitan comes, he says, I have a proposition. Instead of fighting, here's what I'll do. You pray on that other tree, on the other side of your yard. Not this one, just that one. Pray, Fajr, whatever you want. And during the time you pray, I will put a gold coin at your doorstep. Every morning you pray, by the time you finish prayer, you'll find the gold coin. Deal? The sheikh thought about it. What's the harm? أينما تولوا وجوهكم فثم وجه الله. Anywhere you turn, Allah is there. She says, deal. Next morning, sheikh keeps his promise. He goes to the new tree, does the adhan, does the prayer. Sure enough, he finishes, and he goes back to his door. There is a gold coin. The second day, he finishes his prayer in the morning. He goes to his door. No gold coin. What happened? So he starts walking over to his neighbor. He finds that the neighbor is walking over to him. Hey, what happened to my gold coin? Sorry, no more gold coin. But you promised and you made a deal, this and that, the other thing. No. They wrestle. Guess who wins this time?
Never.
Shaitan. Got it? Shifting intentions. This is a way that Shaitan, this is by the way the type of stories, my father taught me as I was growing up, all sorts of fun stories like this that stick in your head and make you really understand how to be aware of your intentions. So when the sheikh was fighting for the sake of nothing except pleasing Allah, he is always victorious. But when the shifting intention happened, now it's a different story. It's who has physical strength, who has, better athletics, whatever, all sorts of other causes. So intention is very, very, very important. I really appreciate you giving me your time this evening, and I wish we can do more. Unfortunately, I'm only staying in the area for another 5 days. I've tremendously enjoyed getting to know all of you and becoming familiar with this beautiful mosque. And inshallah, Allah willing, I'll be I'll attempt, or I'll try to come back and visit you some other time. I will leave this presentation with Brother Mahmoud so he can distribute it as he sees fit. Of course, the PDF version of it. Please, as you use it, don't distribute it at large because this is very precious knowledge. It took me, like I said, 10 years of research. And some people may read it and misunderstand it. So I don't want it to get into the wrong hands, that's all.
I would like a copy of you.
Absolutely. I'll send it to Brother Mahmoud, and Brother Mahmoud, actually it is on his laptop. I'll just convert it to PDF right now and leave it with
And
him.
I'll leave you $1 dinar in the front.
One gold dinar.
Okay, can I tell you one last thing before I leave? Is it okay if I talk about the Quran project?
Of course.
I have your permission? Okay.
شاور العالم شاورنا
Sure. Okay, most of you already know, but I have been conducting a Quran translation project. I've been working on it for a long time, but now it's moved into the execution stage of actually producing and publishing. I have produced a bunch of it. Part of the reason for my trip to the US is to solicit support. We need financial support, to be blunt and honest with you, and there's no shame in it because it's a great blessing, a project that will benefit generations to come. This is something that's needed. As you heard me talk about different concepts in modern language, you're not going to find this in any existing translation right now. Abdullah Yusuf Ali, or all of the translations that you go back to, even Muhammad Asad, which is an excellent translation, it's over 50 years old. And it's done by a person, Austrian, who consulted tafsir that were 1,000 years old. So I think we need more modern, more up-to-date terminology using concepts that fit into the translation itself and the commentary below the translation. The most exciting part is that we're going to do a library of videos, 10 minutes or so each, translating the whole Quran on video. That is not currently available at all. So this project has at least these two projects outcomes. It's expected to take about 4 years, and it requires approximately $10,000 a month plus $10,000 setup fees, setup structure, cost the equipment and websites and all of the basic setup costs, legal and all sorts of things. If you're able to help with this, talk to me. This is desperately needed, and I'm personally going to dedicate, if not all my time, at least 90% of my time. And I don't mean 8 hours a day, I mean my whole day, because I get involved in a project, it's about 10 hours, 12 hours a day at least. Which means that I don't have my career to fall back on, because at my age, there's no going back. Which is a huge commitment. I'm not going to call it sacrifice because it's an honor to be putting myself in this position, but I need your support. So don't dismiss the thought that you can help. Even if you can't help financially, at least help us in dua, or at least remember that this is a project ongoing. And if you have the opportunity to help in any way, Brother Mahmoud will know how to connect with me, and inshallah we'll follow up on this. I really thank you so much for your attendance, and I especially thank our future leaders who are sitting right here. So wonderful to have you with us. I hope you benefited some of these things that we talked about from some of them. And inshallah you will get to a point where you will fall in love with the Quran like we have. I encourage you to take this seriously and to really learn the Arabic language, because without it, you're only going to be smelling the plastic rose. You're never going to smell the real rose unless you learn the Arabic language. It's the difference between a plastic rose and a real rose in a fresh morning in the garden. The beautiful smell does not come through unless you learn the Arabic language. But still, if you can't read the Arabic language of the Quran, read the English language of the Quran. Make it your friend, make it your companion that you cannot live without it.
But at least listen to it. You don't have to read it.
Even listen to it, yeah.
Yes, yes,
Jazakumullah khair. Tafadhal.
really appreciate your time and what you brought to this community. it's not easy to get their attention, those kids that sit still for a long time like you did. So they did a great job. And I don't know if you have it or not, but if you have any link or whatever, maybe ICTV can put it on the website, or donation can go directly to you, if you can coordinate that. Or might be the
my contact is Brother Mahmoud, and he's the umbilical cord to this community, and I'm going to keep it that way because I can't handle the logistics with 10 people or 20 people. I'd rather handle it through a single point of contact that I definitely trust and you trust.
a link or anything that people can donate online.
Let's talk, inshallah, we can do this. We should set up a Patreon or
So we can link it
fund.
to ICTV, other massages, maybe even CARE, maybe might be interested in
Inshallah.
sponsorship.
Inshallah.
Do you have a coded full lecture, full day?
Of this one? No, I don't, unfortunately. Actually, we just got into the habit of recording my lectures in the last month. And you noticed at lunch, we were trying a new video camera and it did not work very well, so we went back to the... So that's what I'm saying, we need some equipment, we need funds. This camera that I purchased for $180, I didn't want to purchase it, but the person who promised to put funds unfortunately did not come through. So I had to buy something, and $180 was what I could afford to do this. And it did not work very well, so I went back to the Surface Pro camera that was there. Hopefully it works better. So I apologize, but that's, those are my limitations. And I hope you understand and you take aggressive stance to help this push forward. So instead of watching from a distance or, watching the cart not move, help push the cart.
God bless you.
Any chance you can?
Do you want me to come back tomorrow? I'm available, but I understand you have activities tomorrow, so you let me know.
Activity is better than shit.
Some communities don't do that, but who will be coming here
How
tomorrow?
about noontime?
I prefer Sunday, actually. If Sunday is possible, I really prefer it.
Sunday morning,
So-
because people,
Sunday morning. Yeah, Sunday.
Sunday, there's no school.
No school.
So Sunday morning will be good.
We should accommodate him because he's doing us a favor.
What is the best time for you?
Anytime, Sunday I'm open. Available anytime you want.
هذا يا خالد متى بدك؟ What do you want?
Okay, who wants Saturday versus Sunday? Raise your hand. Saturday versus Saturday.
Saturday
أو
morning.
مندي حتى لو مندي
After Fajr.
Saturday. Sunday.
Saturday. After Fajr.
لحظة شوي. So, who wants Sunday?
Sunday. Sunday.
Sunday win. Sunday win.
I need to shut down the camera.